Pile number 1 was burning, and nothing could stop it. On the night of October 10, 1957, 11 tons of uranium fuel inside Britain's most important nuclear reactor ignited, sending a plume of radioactive contamination drifting silently across northern England and beyond. What happened over the next 3 days at Windscale would become the worst nuclear accident in British history. But the British public wouldn't learn the full truth for 30 years. The Windscale facility on the Cumbrian coast existed for a single purpose: to produce plutonium for Britain's atomic weapons program. The two graphite-moderated reactors, known as Pile 1 and Pile 2, had been rushed into operation in 1950 under enormous pressure. Britain needed nuclear weapons. Britain needed them fast, and that urgency would exact a terrible price. The graphite in these reactors stored energy in a peculiar way. Bombardment by neutrons displaced carbon atoms from their normal positions, creating what physicists called Wigner energy. If left unchecked, this stored energy could release spontaneously and catastrophically. The solution was controlled heating cycles to release the energy gradually, a process the operators called annealing. On October 7, 1957, operators began the 9th Wigner Release on Pile 1. Something went wrong almost immediately. The temperature readings made no sense. The instruments were failing, or perhaps lying. What the operators couldn't know was that a fuel cartridge had already ruptured. By October 10th, when shift manager Tom Toohey climbed a ladder to peer through an inspection hole into the reactor core, he saw what no one had imagined possible. The uranium fuel was glowing white-hot. Flames were spreading through the reactor's graphite heart. The fire burned for 3 days. Nothing the operators tried could extinguish it. Carbon dioxide injection failed. Starving the fire of air by shutting down the cooling fans only made it worse. The temperature kept climbing, and all the while, radioactive contamination poured from the reactor's chimney stack into the Cumberland sky. On the afternoon of October 11th, with the fire still raging and the reactor in danger of complete structural failure, Toohey made a decision that could have killed him and everyone at the site. He ordered the fire hoses turned on the burning reactor core. Water on a graphite fire, water on white-hot uranium water in a nuclear reactor. It was unthinkable. It was also the only option left. For 15 agonizing hours, firefighters pumped water into Pile 1. And somehow, against all expectations, it worked. The fire went out, but the damage was already done. What wouldn't emerge until decades later was just how close Britain came to losing far more than a reactor. The contamination released during those 3 days spread far beyond Cumberland. Radioactive iodine-131 drifted across England, crossed the Channel, and reached as far as Norway and Belgium. Measurements taken in the following weeks showed fallout across an enormous area. The most concentrated contamination settled within a 200-square-mile zone around the reactor itself. Iodine-131 has a particular affinity for one thing: the human thyroid gland. And it has a particular route into human bodies: milk. Cows grazing on contaminated pastures concentrated the radioactive iodine in their milk. Children drinking that milk concentrated it further in their small thyroid glands. The authorities knew this, and so, in the days following the fire, a secret operation began. For 6 weeks, milk from farms across a 500-square-kilometer area was collected, transported away, and dumped. Day after day, tanker trucks arrived at farms, took the milk, and disposed of it in secret. The farmers were told their milk was being tested. They weren't told why. They certainly weren't told that their land had been contaminated by one of the worst nuclear accidents in history. The official explanation to Parliament was carefully crafted. There had been an incident. No one had been harmed. The situation was under control. Prime Minister Harold Macmillan personally approved this message. But behind closed doors, Macmillan was reading something very different: a detailed technical report prepared by Sir William Penney, the physicist who had led Britain's atomic weapons program. Sir William Penney's investigation was thorough and damning. The report identified the causes of the fire, catalogued the failures that allowed it to spread, and assessed the scale of the radioactive release. It named names. It assigned blame. and Harold Macmillan decided that the British public would never see it. The problem wasn't just embarrassment. The problem was America. Britain's entire nuclear deterrent depended on its relationship with the United States. The 1958 US-UK Mutual Defense Agreement, which would give Britain access to American nuclear weapons technology, was under negotiation at the very moment Windscale burned. Macmillan understood that any public admission of incompetence at Britain's nuclear facilities could doom that agreement. The full Penney Report was classified and sealed away. A sanitized summary was released instead. The truth would wait 30 years. In 1983, the television documentary Windscale, the nuclear laundry reignited public interest in what had really happened in 1957. Pressure mounted. Questions were asked in Parliament. And finally, in 1988, the Penney Report was declassified. What emerged confirmed what critics had suspected for decades. The fire had released approximately 20,000 curies of iodine-131, along with significant quantities of cesium-137, polonium-210, and other radioactive isotopes. Subsequent studies estimated that the Windscale fire would cause somewhere between 100 and 240 additional cancer deaths over the following decades. The true number will never be known with certainty. Thyroid cancer takes years to develop. The victims, if they can be called victims, would never know which invisible particle had sealed their fate. The reactor site itself remained contaminated for decades. Pile 1 was sealed and left to decay. The decommissioning process, begun in the 1980s, continues to this day. The total cleanup cost has exceeded £2 billion, and the work is not finished. Windscale was renamed Sellafield in 1981, an attempt to escape the shadow of October 1957. But names change nothing. The graphite remains, the contamination persists, and the questions endure. What Windscale revealed was a pattern that would repeat itself across the nuclear age, from 3 Mile Island to Chernobyl to Fukushima. The collision between nuclear technology and political necessity produces silence first and truth only later. Governments suppress, agencies minimize, and ordinary people, the farmers whose milk was taken, the children who drank what remained, the workers who fought the fire with nothing but hoses, bear the invisible costs. Harold Macmillan got his American alliance. Britain got its nuclear weapons. And somewhere in the hills of Cumberland, the rain still falls on soil that remembers what burned there in October 1957. The land keeps records that governments cannot classify. The half-life of cesium-137 is 30 years. The half-life of institutional secrecy, it seems, is about the same.